What's up, y'all? After a couple of months for Raising Souls. This is Albert. My name is Albert, pronouns he, him, his, and we are back with another video for my Raising Souls reading list. And this book here, the book we're going to be talking about today is Black Boy Out of Time by Hari Ziyad. For those who don't know who they are a black non-binary cultural critic, journalist, and activist organizer, mainly in the New York City area. And this one is a queer, a coming of age queer memoir with going into your abolitionist politics. So I would say it's like George M. Johnson's All Boys Aren't Blue and Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and you have Black Boy Out of Time. So this one is a very interesting read. It took me like three days to finish it, so it's very easy to read if you like understand you probably have to like know some like abolitionist terminology and queer the know about queerness and blackness and how all of those things intersect into a certain individual's experience. And this one tells you more about how gender and the prisons, all of those kind of overlap within each other to create this all these systems of oppression. So what is considered a man, what's considered woman, and the man and woman gender binary that can be harmful and violent, and how how can we envision a world for people to be liberated without the confines of gender, prison, and through the perspective of someone who doesn't identify as either man or woman. Hari is non-binary, so and it tells you, give you like like make you understand like why the gender of man, they don't really describe to what society considers a man, like just through genitalia, through the chromosomes and all that stuff. Like all of that is just doesn't really give you like an understanding of what gender is and how it's used to justify acts of violence and your role in the community. So that's how we got into a lot of areas that Hari talks about, like Miss Afropedia, which is a term that they coined. It originated from, it's another word that describes the hatred and disdain for children, but putting Afro into it. So Miss Afropedia is the hatred and disdain for and systematic discrimination that Black children have to go through. Like you see it with the school to prison pipeline. You see with the way how society treats people that are queer, the way that children, especially Black children, are adultified. Like they don't get the luxury of childhoods and stuff like that. And in and this is also like a regional perspective. So having to go through all these things, racism, gender-based violence, and poverty. It's some poverty, some class issues that Hari was going through, and when they were in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. So that gives that perspective, because we had Darnell L. Moore and George M. Johnson going through their experiences in New Jersey, specific like the Camden area, but this one is Midwestern. So the Ohio Black queer experience. So that is what I found very unique about Black Boy Out of Time. So Yeah, so I'm not gonna like dove into like a deep analysis into it, because this is I feel like I will regurgitate some of the videos that I did previously, but I like how Hari centers youth, and how the carceral system doesn't give them a lot of freedom. Like, there's all these, it's like it starts with the home. Like, there's all these rules that Hari had to abide by in their household, with the way that by their mother, their grandmother, and sometimes their father, and how they had to come to a sense of self through that, in the household, until they got to college and then graduated, and um, try to fight for a world where that centers abolition. So the chap so there's like sections that Hari titles canto. So there's canto 1. So this is these are stories that focuses on their Black experience. So Hari talks about the egregious infrastructure in New York City, like the transportation and all of that stuff that is still going on. The environmental and climate injustice that residents of New York City, Black residents, and poor residents had to endure. And then there's talking about therapy and doing inner child work. So for those who don't know about inner child work, it's pretty much the freedoms that you didn't have as a child. Now the things you couldn't do as a child, now you can do as an adult, and trying to envision a world where your inner where you wish you were able to do when you were a child. So whether that's riding a bike or something like that. So and also being affirmed in your identity and your experience. So let me see, were there any quotes that stuck out to me on chapter 1, which was titled carceral dissonance. That was also a term that they were going through. Like, you understand like the harm that the carceral system did to you, but you also using the carceral system to put harms on others. So it's pretty much the hypocrisy um of the prisons. Like, I think we all understand how problematic and harmful police and prisons can be, specifically to Black communities. But using that same system to address that, or going throughout the harms in your community, how can you be a prison abolitionist when you're doing all that? So that's what Hari was also interrogating in the book. And yeah, Ziyad said, because the only solution they offer is punishment. Adhering to carceral logics prevents us from recognizing our role in each other's pain, sometimes even as a coping mechanism developed in an understandable attempt to avoid the cruel and constant hand of punishment ourselves. Like, we're so socialized through the carceral system that we're thinking, like, yeah, just because I got harmed, what am I doing to actually heal? Do I think I need to harm another person to heal my trauma? So that's so we can only get through abolition with that, when we actually tackle that mindset. And then yeah, chapter 1. Let me see if there were any quotes that stuck out to me. Oh, yes, there was. So this was on Ziyad was going through their experience through therapy. Therapy is not a substitute for communal healing practices or a community that cares for you, but it can help you better recognize what that community looks like, or aid you in becoming a member of a caring community for somebody else and for yourself. When done that with that goal in mind, it is a resource. And for folks who experience marginalization, it can be especially helpful if your therapist shares a marginalized experience with you. They are then less likely to question whether your experience is valid. I'm not sure we would have gotten very far if my therapist weren't Black and queer, or if he didn't encourage me to continue exploring healing practices taught to me by root workers at the same time. So pretty much showing how therapy really saved Hari from a lot of anxiety and stress, and give them like some tools to use that can be helpful in their when they're navigating through life. And then chapter 2 was untitled "A Prayer for My Father," so pretty much talking about their relationship with their father and how complicated it was. So I like these specific chapters. There are chapters throughout called like "A Prayer for," etc. And this one is "A Prayer for My Father." So it's like letters that Hari was writing to themselves, writing to their inner child. So what they can say to like their 12-year-old self right now. So stuff like that, which I think were very cool and very unique about this memoir. And chapter 3 was titled "Now-a-laters." So pretty much going into their family background. So has like 18 siblings. So pretty much having to navigate having an identity while going through while not having to interact with 18 other identities. And then there are memories of the quote unquote neighborhood bully named Roberto. And Roberto was a big kid, so and they were pretty there were Hari was them and Hari didn't never really got along in the neighborhood, and Hari was like self-reflecting how those ideas about Roberto being this big buff and kind of like animalistic caricatures that Black people have always been depicted and have always had to succumb through stereotypes in media. um, Hari internalized those stereotypes and projected on them on Roberto, and realized when we got to fast forward into Mike Brown's the murder of Michael Brown in 2014, how the media amplified those same descriptions, specifically with the police officer that killed him, Darren Wilson, and how um, really interrogating and eradicate those stereotypes will get us out of that carceral mentality that is doing nothing but harm. So that's what was interesting about that chapter. And Hari was also talking about their experience when they were in public school, because they were homeschooled for a period of time, and then they got into a public high school. So talking about the kids, Tierra and TT versus Marissa and Sarah, and how the word ghetto is used in a derogatory manner. And then there is gender policing through hair and resisting narratives to the state. So we have such a stress on emphasis on gender, to the point to we tell a child that they can't have this certain hairstyle because they are this gender. So Hari was upset with their mom about them cutting their hair at 5 years old. And Hari was, whether they knew that at 5 years old, wanted to keep their hair. Like, they like their hair, they don't want it to get cut. But their mom was like, if you want to be a man, you have to cut your hair. And considering like this is a 5-year-old child, not someone who even knows how to pay bills and stuff like that. So it's like we have all these all of these standards and put them on children, and we didn't realize, and their mom probably didn't even realize that they were holding them back from their sense of self. So that's like the power of hair, and how gender is used to keep people from their inner freedoms, and how that's literally a narrative by the state, like that their mom put on them. And then there was A Prayer for Rest, and this one is pretty much tackling this idea of exceptionalism, and you don't need to be excellent to be somebody. You're really just somebody just by existing and how you're interacting with other people. And then there's chapter 5, which is titled Dumb Smart. Um, Ziyad went into how their upbringing. They were raised in I think it was Hindu, and specifically the Hare Krishna religion is the religion that they grew up on. And talking about because Zaya was society would consider a smart kid. Like I think they were salutatorian of their high school class, and Hari sees like how kids are put in specific categories based on the society's way of determining intelligence. So like there's this gifted and talented program. When I was in school, there was a science and tech program. There are a lot of these magnet programs, these private and charter schools, and how it's really keeping children away from their own community. So that's and it also gives room to the school to prison pipeline. Um, and then they were talking about a white classmate that was harassing who they're friends now, this girl named Betty, and this white classmate. Like you literally understand like how racism is literally socialized, especially with white kids. Like the way they interact with black kids is you see it like early on. Like this is literally like middle or high school. Like you can just see it. And then there's a teacher that Hari had named Mr. Smith, and there's this tardiness policy, and it's very punitive. Like if you're 5 minutes late to class, like you're going to detention and stuff like that. And it's like if we really understand that individuals make mistakes and stuff like that, why is there's this need to punish something that if we only just actually understand that the community that you're in, these kids have to care for their families too. So it's like stuff like the tardiness policy. It can really lead to a violent system. And let me see if there were any other quotes that stuck out to me. No. Yep, so that leads into Canto 2, which is titled Queer. So a focus on their queer identity. And this one is the first chapter is chapter 6, which is titled A Prayer for Limitless. So envisioning freedom and pretty much going back into their father, how their father loves conspiracy theories. So I think that's what's interesting. That's what's so interesting. Like you be fed you don't even realize what type of lies that you be fed, that you be questioning everything. So conspiracy theories, you'll be like, it may not be far from the truth if that happens. So it's when Hari got into how society dictates gender and sexuality, and pretty much going into that. And then there's chapter 7, which is titled Guilt and Gods. So Ziyad had this friend named Michael, and when they were in high school, and Hari was not they were their parents' child. They always wanted to make their parents proud, especially their mother, Mata, they call her. But they're not. They weren't really understanding of queerness because of how religious they were, and then Hari wanted to spend some time with Michael. So, and Hari wasn't too rebellious, so it was their first time like actually disobeying their parents, and for something that's so unnecessary and harmful. And they got to spend the night together, and there wasn't any like sexual activity, but it was literally just a moment of intimacy and tenderness that Hari wished they had more of, because I think they realized like how powerful something like as careful touch and a hug and cuddling or something like that can be that gives you like a feeling of security and safety that is rare and is very special. And then Hari got back home, and their Mata saw them. So Mata tried to get separate Hari from Michael. So it's like what could have been if Hari and Michael actually had like a relationship if it wasn't for homophobia. And then let me see, was there a quote that stuck out to me? Yeah, Ziyad said, God for me is in fostering a true connection with myself, which means reclaiming my childhood, reclaiming who I was before I was taught to fear the parts of me that don't fit neatly into the world, and repairing the fracture caused by my carceral dissonance. So that was how they had like a tough relationship with religion. I think they're still following they're still Hindu, but it was a very tough relationship with it at that moment. And then chapter 8 was a prayer for another world, where they were talking about how deprived they were from their childhood because of that. Some an example like that with Michael, it didn't allow them to be their authentic self and actually get the affirmation and love that they deserved. And let me see, is there a quote that stuck out to me on that? Oh, it was a funny story because I think it was either their cousin or niece. This is adult Haris, but they were in a conversation with their niece or cousin, and she came out to them, so realize that they're not alone. Like there's other queer members in their family, so there's that was a very special moment. And then chapter 9 was titled "Representation Matters," and this is representation matters question mark. So pretty much talking about how identity is weaponized for violence and stuff like that. So what were they talking about? Going to a college and being in a PWI film school, and there's all these and if you go to a film school, you have to do films and all that stuff, but you have to create stories that actually try your best not to be harmful with the characters that you use, and you also have to worry about the feedback and the criticisms you get from the film. Like this film is being criticized by white students, and this is about and Hari tried to have a story about a black gender queer woman. So it's like that's an experience that the white students will never understand. So and they didn't even realize like they were putting like caricatures, because I don't think Hari identified as non-binary, but they don't have share the same identity as the central character. So that in itself is some problematicism with it. Like there's no consultation. Like you're a student, you're learning, so there's some grace and care for that, but it's like you have to be careful with how you tell your stories. So and it's clear through when Ziyad was talking about President Obama, how Obama has some respectability politics and is imperialist and all of that, and knowing that just because you're a black person in a high imperial position to fulfill the empire's interest, you don't care for black folks. You have to not care for black folks if you want to be in that position. So that's how Ziyad got into their radicalization. And then there's the Baina Lakim El Amin story, which was a story that I'd never heard of until I read this book, in which there was an altercation at a gay bar between a black person and a white person, and the black person, I think it was caught on camera or something, that the black person hit the white person, but then other footage came that the white person incited the violence. And at first it was seen as like a gay hate crime against an LGBTQ plus person, but then it turns out that Elamine is a black queer person, and also Muslim. So you think about as anti-blackness, Islamophobia, and anti-queerness, and guess who got to prison? So that's that. So Ziyad tried to get into this story, and I think that's when they created Race Baiter, the journal um, publication that Ziyad created. Ziyad is the editor in chief of Race Baiter, and Elamine's story was like one of the first stories that Race Baiter published. And Ziyad said, to be unseen doesn't always have to be mean that I am erased. We don't need to see ourselves on their screens to know that we are not monsters. We know this before we learn otherwise. We have other platforms in our homes, in our neighborhoods, and in our communities that show us this naturally. We don't need to be seen in their media to be valued. We just need whatever is seen not to be used to erase our value. We need whatever is represented in their media not to be shoved down our throats and internalized. Yes, representation matters, but we don't need our versions of their propaganda. We represent ourselves and how we show up in our relationships with one another every day. So that's like the true representation that Ziyad cares about. How do we show up for ourselves, not just within the state's propaganda and stories. And that was it from chapter 9. And then chapter 10 was titled A Prayer for Choice, in which they were talking about like the limitations of gender, not just through hair, but this time through clothes and respectability politics when it comes to being presentable, and how all of those are carceral logics to police gender expression and performance. So Ziyad was talking about how, and sometimes Ziyad dreams in clothes that are typically feminine, like probably like high heels or a crop top and stuff like that, like stuff that you wouldn't typically, that aren't typically masculine presenting folks wear. And then there's pretty much like there's the time and place when you care about being presentable, like for a wedding, for example. That's probably like the only time that Ziyad was dressed in a button down and a shirt. Like they hated button downs and stuff like that. Like they barely have like formal wear. So because formal wear is very gendered, like women, like feminine presenting people tend to wear dresses and stuff like that, cishet women and stuff like that. And then there's the men's, typically men's clothes, like a suit, a tie, and a tuxedo and stuff like that. So all of those Ziyad had to endure, and I think that gave more of an understanding on why they ascribe to non-binary, because they realized like gender is literally just a social construct that people don't really have to live by. And it's yeah, and one of their family members was asking me, what made you like what made you like boys? And I was like, I didn't have a choice. Like this gay is a choice narrative that has a homophobic undertone to it, that lifestyle and stuff like that. So it's pretty much tells Ziyad like they just had to just go through life, the people they interact, the experience they experience, and they go into their desires and loves, and they realize like they were attracted to men. So that's like you won't say like straight is a choice and stuff like that. So that's what they were getting into. Ziyad said, I tried to avoid drawing attention to the scars on my body that remind me of how you were lost. Talking to their younger self. Because many of them I played a hand in creating. Many were caused by trying to prove something to the world, to my family that never needed proving. Many were caused by trying to show I was man enough to defend myself, or gay enough never to have to question my sexuality at all, when to you, questions had been okay. So it's like you pretty much have it pretty much goes into no one can really tell you how to live your life but yourself. And Ziyad also said, wholeness has never been a matter of stability. It's a matter of being able to lose your footing, to question and doubt and waver with enough balance to avoid tipping over. So, in order to get to your wholeness, you have to ask all these questions for yourself. Like, what do you like? What makes you happy? What gives you like a sense of freedom? What do you hate? And makes you feel limited and restricted? So those are the typical questions that a lot of queer people had to face. And then there's chapter 11 titled "My Gender is Black." So they're saying that's how they got into their non-binary identity, and they're saying how black in itself is against the state's interest. So whatever I am is blackness. I'm an abolitionist. I am non-binary. I don't describe to the gender binary. I'm not subscribed to whatever colonialism and imperialism and capitalism has tried to force upon me on how to live my life. And yeah, it's like all these experiences that Ziyad had, like from when people keep referring to their dog as he, him, and a boy when their dog is a girl, Kia, and they were talking about a 2020 episode about intersex people, and then the misogyny that is socialized in families and gendered violence, and boys do this, girls do that. And then there's how even in history, like if you think about slavery, black people were commodities, and commodities are objects, and objects don't have gender. So thinking about the specific colonized violence that is on gender when black people were slaves, and that's a commodification of itself. So think about all those type of interrogations on the behaviors that we adapted to and so we're socialized into. And I think that was it for that chapter. Oh no. Ziyad said this, but my anxieties around my gender were never about whether I was non-binary or intersex or gay or straight. They weren't about a need to be understood. They were about feeling that being imprisoned by these concepts, being forced to act or be or look a certain way because the carceral world needed a way to understand me, made it possible for me to feel the freedom Mata had tried to safeguard in me as a child, and it made me an agent in stealing the freedoms from others too. And they also said, if my gender is to be freeing, it must be defined by my destruction of and accountability for the carceral systems that hindered my parents' love for their black children. So that was it for that chapter. And then there's the next chapter titled "A Prayer for New Language." So that's when they were talking about when they fell in love with their now fiance Timothy, and they witnessed like a love and romance that they never felt before from past relationships, and even the love from former platonic and familial relationships that they had. So that's how they fell in love with Timothy. And let me see, was there any quotes that stood by? There was. Yeah, right here. Tim showed me that love is not just a feeling you get, just lightning, and you have no choice but to let the static run through you. When the comet hits, you don't always know what to let run through you. So it's electric boogie boogie woogie. I think they were talking about the electric slide on this chapter too, so that was pretty funny. And then there was chapter 13, which is titled "Logging Out of Passport Twitter," which is a funny title because if you understand Twitter and the way people like to promote luxury and stuff like that, like you're not living a life if you don't have a passport. That was what Amanda Seales from Insecure said. So pretty much talking about like you're not worthy if you're not having a passport. You're not living life if you don't have a passport. Like you need you have to do this in order to be worthy, which I think it's a troll, but it's there's like a violent nature when it comes to the tourist economy as well. Like we have to understand what colonialism is. Like if you're taking space and benefiting from another person's expense, you're a colonizer. And Ziyad was tackling their position when they were going to a trip to Puerto Rico and talk about the tourist economy there. Like Puerto Rico, everyone knows it goes through a lot, but that's just every other country. Like look at the United States and how much we're overcoming things. Like there's a specific town that was going through violence and poverty, and tourists were encouraged to not go to that side of the town. So Zaya was really understanding like how we internalize these messages. And then they were talking about I don't know if they're friends now, but this is a friend that Hari had named Cloud, who was a white non-binary person, and talking about what it means to have a white friend and developing into an abolitionist framework. And it was tough for Ziyad to go through. Like there was all these they were talking about when it was late at night and they were trying to go somewhere, and Cloud wanted to go to this specific gay bar, and Hari recalled having a moment of being sexually assaulted over there. And then Cloud was like, you have to be so unreasonable, because Hari refused. Like I don't think Hari gave the detail that they were sexually assaulted in that bar, but said that they didn't want to go to that bar. But Cloud was like, you're being unreasonable, you're being like, just because pretty much invalidating their feelings and stuff like that. So they were going through, it was a quote unquote friendship that you definitely grow from. And yeah, Zayed said, it was the same language my Black Puerto Rican friends asked me to speak while when talking about their home, a language where no one's home means careless escape, because everyone's home is a place where care is given generously. And going into Cloud, pretty much talking about their relationship are always going to have the dynamic that is given from anti-blackness. You have to be careful. They have to be careful with the language that they have to give. Like they have to be careful about the knowledge that they were given. They had to be careful on how they go into certain spaces. Like if it's a space that is centered for Black people, a white person should not take up space. So they have to be mindful and considerate of having a relationship and navigating life together through that. And then there's Canto 3, which is titled Free. So this is when they get into a focus on liberation and dismantling of the carceral system. Their chapter 14 was titled A Prayer for Healing, in which the Ziyad was recalling two incidents of sexual assault from family friends, and they realized that they were vulnerable at that moment. They couldn't give consent because they were a child, and it was pretty similar to George M. Johnson's sexual assault, in which they were, I guess this is the way they were expressing that they were harmed. So that's it's stuff that was tough to read, and like you don't even understand that you were harmed until like years later, and that's a trauma in itself. And then there's let me see, is there a quote that stuck out to me? No. Chapter 15 was titled Trigger Warning. And then it was going into how people should understand childhood sexual violence, and that children should have boundaries and respect for their bodies, and no one owns their bodies but the child themselves. And we have to go about how we address harm in an abolitionist world, because just because we can really like get rid of prisons like tomorrow, but there's still like a violent there's still stuff that is violent that's going on. Like we have to talk about how do we delve into how abolition can accommodate people that are trans, non-conforming, and gender queer, and those who identify as women, those who identify as those who are disabled, those who are fat, and those who are dark skinned, and all these marginalized identities. And how do we give them safety in an abolitionist world? And we have to understand that prisons are inherently violent. It's a reformation of the colonial structure of slavery. And then let me see, was there a quote that stuck out to me in this chapter? You have to go into the harm that you've done, and yeah. And then yeah, that's it for that chapter. Chapter 16 is titled "A Prayer for Freedom," in which we have to go into how important it is to have tenderness, especially when you're a child. And there's a carceral thinking to that. And we have to get rid of that carceral thinking. Like just playing with, just literally touching another boy in society is not kind to those who just trying to have tenderness between two boys and tenderness between two men, because of how masculinity is socialized and what's considered a man, and what this is a thing that man doesn't do. And then I think that's it for chapter 16. Chapter 17 was titled "If We Must Die." So this is pretty much talking about this was focusing on the story of Corinne Gaines. For those who don't know who Corinne Gaines is a black mother who was killed by police in Baltimore. And if you know anything about the history between the black communities and Baltimore Police Department, it is all, it tends to be violent, and it tends to be not the best. So Corinne Gaines was stopped by for a traffic violation, similar to Sandra Bland, and it's there's a recorded video of Corinne, like where Corinne recorded the video of them being stopped by the police, and pretty much told their children, especially their child Cody, who's her son, about, this is police, this is literally what they do. And they had to go through that whole encounter with the police. And then I think it was like a few weeks later, it was the police raided her home, and it was about a minor traffic violation. The police raided her home, and then there was and then she had a gun, and she was holding her son. And then the raid was happening for like 5 hours, like this negotiation with the police and Corinne. And then they eventually shot and killed her. And they shot, I think her son was shot too, but they survived. But it shows you about pretty much how death is inevitable, and you have to go about you really have to be go through life. You can't really enjoy life if you haven't having moments of liberation and moments of fighting for freedom. So that's what Ziyad learned from how Corinne lived her life. And I think that was it. And Corinne's murder, when we go into like police violence of black people, Corinne's tends to be erased in the conversation because she was armed, and she was a black woman, a poor black woman who had to survive and had to go through life with a violent police system. And there's even black men that don't even care about her story and how it should be, and how we should learn from that to go towards a world that is centers on justice, freedom, and abolition. And then I think that's it for that's it for chapter 17. Then chapter 18 was titled "A Prayer for Courage," in which Ziyad was talking about these moments where they were fearing death, that they got into alcoholism and smoking, and it got really bad to them when their mom was diagnosed with COVID-19. And yeah, this is a new book, y'all. This is like released like just this year. So in the Hari was writing this while the pandemic was happening, and I think it's pretty much similar to Bell Hooks' All About Love, when they were talking about when she was diagnosed with breast cancer and how we should center caring for ourselves and caring for others. And Ziyad just needed like a release from everything and realized like that's is only creating harm, and that's what the carceral system is trying to do to you. And it's like, what literally, it'll be nice if you can just die on your own will, and you're dying knowing that you did that you love to do in life. And then chapter 19 was titled Abolition, and pretty much talking about how police never helped the communities that Hari was in, even when they were talking about domestic violence in the house. Like the police, like once you get into like realize like everyone is complex and human beings make all these decisions that aren't the best. Do you really need police? So they were getting into when their grandma, Mother Boomy, and Mata were having a fight, and their cousin Eric, who was incarcerated, and helping their sister Ganga separate from their husband, who was toxic and possibly abusive, helping their friend from a suicide attempt, and showing how important community care and mutual aid is. And they also talked about the parallels between that and the parallels between those experiences and the Sharon uprising in Mexico, which I think was similar to the Baltimore uprising that happened in 2015 after the murder of Freddie Gray, in which there was a city in Mexico that has so much violence in it that there was an uprising because there was government negligence and exploitation in there. And then that was it for chapter 19. And then there's an epilogue titled A Prayer for My Grandmother, in which they were talking about the final moments with their grandma, Mother Boomy, and how important it is to care for people that know that their time is coming, because they were having a walk with their grandmother, and she was silent the whole time. And Hari just know like it's important to know that their grandma is there, even though she probably couldn't speak to the best of her ability. And that get into the importance of having affirmation for yourself and the people that you care about, and how that in itself is liberation practice. And I think that is a closure for the story. So yeah, it was quick to finish this book. It took me 3 days, and you learn a lot from it. And I really enjoy like how they correlated gender with how prisons operate, and how there's these restrictions on certain freedoms that people are given in society, and we have to get rid of it in order to live a true free world. And that's it. And happy Pride, y'all, and happy Juneteenth. I think this was like a perfect book to do a video on, because it delves into like how prison is a form of slavery, and how we still need emancipation for political prisoners and all that stuff, people that are incarcerated, and Pride Month because this is a queer coming of age memoir. So thank y'all for staying with me through this. Make sure y'all follow my reading list at Raisin Souls, and my personal Instagram at Intellectual Albert, which will be on the description box below. And y'all enjoy your Juneteenth and happy Pride. Stay tuned for another book. And take care. Bye.